Hello, this is Randy with Excel for Freelancers, and welcome to the Dynamic Certificates. In this training, you're going to learn how to create amazing dynamic certificates and bring data from a table, creating, emailing, and printing those certificates on just a click of a button. I can't wait. Let's get started. All right, thanks so much for joining me. I've got so much to show you today. We're going to be taking this data in the table. We're going to be showing you how you can create these amazing dynamic certificate templates simply with a click of a button. All of the information, all the data in these certificates is going to be dynamic. So you're going to be able to create your own certificates using your own data table, and no matter how many you have, you're going to be able to print or email them in just a click of a button. So when you click a button and you need to email or print it, just click the button and you'll see that the email gets created automatically into a PDF form. And if you open up that PDF, we see a nice certificate that is custom to the person. So it's going to be a really amazing training. I've been wanting to get this to you for quite a while now. So you're going to be able to create any type of certificate, email it, print it based on some settings. So it's going to be really, really original, unique. And so I can't wait. Before I get to that, I'm really super excited. You can tell in my voice that finally the Excel for Freelancers mentorship program is now live. This is an amazing program. I'm going to include the links down below so you can't miss it. If you want to take your passion for Excel and learn how to create passive income while you sleep, I'm going to do just that in this program. It's going to be weekly videos, about 90 minutes, just like I do on YouTube, but they're going to be private for mentorship followers only, those people who sign up in the program. We're going to go over every detail, and that means we're going to be defining our applications. Why are we building them? What are we building? And who are we building them for? Then we're going to go through the process flow chart. We're going to be creating web frame designs. You're going to be creating your own applications right along with me. What am I going to be creating? I'm going to be creating an incredible accounting application as we develop this software. What's in that accounting software? You're going to see we're going to have invoicing, inventory, chart of accounts. We're going to be creating purchase orders, transactions, recurring, a full dashboard, user rights and lists, automated email notifications. We're going to be creating multi-user sharing and sync so that when you create your applications, you can share them and sync them with anybody in the world. I'm going to show you how to sell these applications. We're going to go over the deployment. That includes creating WordPress websites, creating the payment systems, creating that recurring. Everything's going to be in this program. This is not a quick get rich scheme. It's going to take a while. In fact, it's going to take months, but we're going to be timing it weekly videos so that you can also develop your own applications in parallel to mine. We're even going to cover license control and version control so you can control your applications, turn them on and off from anywhere in the world, fully licensed Excel applications. So this is something I've been working on for months and months. I'm really happy to share that with you. Go ahead and click the link down below. Check it out. Let me know if it's something that you think it'll fit for you. Go ahead and sign up. I would love to have you in the mentorship program. All right, let's get started on this week's training. So basically what I want to do is I want to take information from this table, bring it into this certificate and create this certificate automatically. So that basically as we change information, for example, this is the student row that's connected. If we were to change that row, you're going to see everything in this certificate changes. Even the level achieved. The level achieved is based on a score. So for example, you see these different scores. Based on that score, we're going to have the level achieved. And it's going to be all based on this table right here. So basically, if their score falls between any of these, their level is going to be different and dynamic based on that. So we're going to show you how to do that. Of course, we're going to show you how to create a dynamic email. We've done that before, but we're going to include the contents, and it's all going to be done with a click of a button. We're also going to show you how to easily print an email. For example, if we remove the certificate created and we click the button create and send, it's going to do both. It's going to print a copy and it's going to email a copy. Just like that, it's now created a copy, and now it's printing a copy to my default printer, which is the Snagit. And you'll see here my Snagit, it's been automatically created. So whatever your default printer is, it's going to print to that. So that's a really, really amazing training. So we're going to get right to it because there's a lot of components on this, and I can't wait to show it to you. It is not a complex VBA. So even if you're new to VBA or you're not sure too much on VBA, we're going to walk you through really slowly, and it's very, very relatively VBA is very easy on this. So this is a great one for beginners of VBA because I'm going to go through step by step for you on how to create these dynamic. You can use any certificate you want. In fact, I just started with a blank certificate. Essentially, it is a blank. So if I'm to bring this, let's bring it to the top, bring it all the way to the front, just so we can see what it looks like without any of the data. That's what it looks like. So that means everything else in that certificate is nearly dynamic except for a few labels. So when we bring it bring it to the back, and we'll see that now all the data here. So we've got basically the first and the last name. We've got a label here. We've even got a different type of label here called the honor award. So if we were to change that to a different, let's just say we were to change that to service award, it would automatically change on the title. So it's extremely, extremely dynamic. You can change it to just your liking. You could probably even change the look and feel of it just when we click format. You can also change the color if you like to have multiple colors. You could also pretty much change that through colors as well. We'll keep it white for now. So there's a lot of flexibility. You can search Google for your own template, of course. It's very, very easy to create this. And I'm going to show you just how we did it. All right, so what do we have so far? We've got just a basic table of student information. First name, last name, completion date, the school name, teacher name, class project, the score, maybe a total score, email, it's important for email, and the send type. This is just a data validation. There's three options here. Email, print, and print an email. And how do we get that data validation? Into the data validations. Click data validation. We'll see that there's just three options here. Email, print, and print an email. So I want users to choose between those three. You can have others if you want to add to it. And so if it's just email, so a few conditions apply. When we click the create and send, what I want to do is I want to check if there's any certificate that has not been completed. For example, if we click it now, nothing's going to happen because they've already been sent. But as soon as we delete one, click create and send, and you're going to see the email gets created just like that. So we can easily create emails based on that. And so if we try it again, now we have the send on date, November 30th, 10:31 a.m. That's the time of this recording. That is the current date. So I want that put in there just so we don't duplicate the send. And I'll show you the PDF that gets created within that. And so when we double click the PDF, we'll see that it's a PDF that got created. It contains all of the dynamic information that is on that certificate. So that's pretty cool. All right, so this is a relatively simple, basic, but there's some really cool formulas and some really cool shortcuts that I want to show you that I have not showed you before. So what do we have in here? Basically, what we will have is all the variables. All we need to do is change the row and all the information changes. So let's show you how we do that. Well, the first thing we want to know is I want to put all the information here based on this row. For example, the row is here, 6. So if row 6, David Davis, I want that information. So this is what we're talking about in row. So when we choose row 5, we're going to show the first value in the table, row 5. So all this is the data that I want to pull. And we use that using formulas. We're going to use that. So let's just see what kind of formulas. We're going to use an index formula. What are we indexing? We're indexing the student table. Well, what is the student table? That is an entire table. When we click on the name manager, and it's a dynamic name, click on the student table and tab over, we will see that it's based on the entire table from column E all the way to column N. So let's zoom in and take a look at this formula. This is an offset formula. We're starting it out in cell E4. That is actually going to include the header. Why are we including the header? We're including the header because if you were to delete all the data using the delete key, deleting the rows, it could cause an error. It probably would if all the data was deleted because there is no more data. But as soon as we include the header, which won't be deleted, there is no error. So we want to make sure that, of course, the header is not included in our data. So what we want to do is we want to advance it one row down. One row down, this offsets the row one row down. So that does it there. We don't have to offset any columns. Count A, what are we counting? We're counting all, we need to know the number of rows to count. We need to know all the rows from starting in E4. Again, E4, it's going to cause an error if we don't include that header row when we delete rows. So E4 all the way through E1000, that will count all of them, and then it's going to subtract 1. Why are we subtracting 1? Well, we're subtracting 1 because we're including the header row, right? But the header row is not data, so we do want to subtract 1, so it's 1 less because the header row we really don't want to count. And then we have 9. What is this 9? This is the number of columns in our offset, the number of columns. We have 9 columns in our table, and I want to encompass the entire table in this case, so all 9 columns. So when we tab over, we will see that all of the data. In fact, I've added certificate created, but that's fine. We don't need that. There's actually 10, but this certificate created is something that's added through VBA. We're not going to be pulling any information from that, so we don't need to include that column. All right, so we close that so we understand how we get the index. So if we're indexing student table, and what row do I want to index? I want to index B4 minus 4. Why do we subtract 4? What is B4? B4 is 5, right? But I don't want the 5th row. If we just use 5 in itself, if we're going to go, it's going to start at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's going to pull this information. So I need to subtract because this is the 5th row in our named range, right? The 5th row in our named range, but I don't want the 5th row in our named range. I want the 5th row completely, just the 5th row, because that's where I'm going to pull the data. So to do that, I need to subtract 4. So we're going to pull 5 minus 4 equals 1. So I want to know the row number of the student table 1 and the column 2. What is that going to pull? Row 1, column 2 of our table. Row 1 here, column 2 is the first name. Column 1 would be the last name. So let's take a look at that. The last name here is 1. The first name is 2. Okay, so we see how we get that. We're going to index the table. We're going to determine the row based on this number minus the row of the dynamic range table. And then we're going to get the column. The column is 2. So for the first name, last name, of course, is 1. First name is 2. The completion date is 3. Again, we're just moving on. All we're doing is changing this. And in this case, I want uppercase. So I've added uppercase. Everything else is the same, except we're going to be indexing column 4, which is where the school name is. But I want all uppercase just because I want it nice in there. So I've added the formula upper to that, which is going to make all of the text uppercase. You could do that with any field here. The teacher name would be in column 5, while the Colossus project is in column 6, the score in 7. The dynamic level, let's take a look at this formula. We know the score, but the level is not in here, right? We don't know the level. We know the score, but the level's not in this table. Where do we get the level from? Well, the level from is based on this particular table. So if the score is from 90 to 100, I want to give them a level of exceptional. 80 to 89, excellent. 70 to 79, very good, and so on and so forth. So how do we do that? Well, basically what I want to do is I want to use a formula. If I have a formula, I want to determine where their score fits in this table. Once I find where their score fits in, I want to find the uppermost of this, and then I want to use an index match to determine it. So let's break this formula apart. We're using an array and see just how we did that. All right, so let's take a look at this, and this is a larger formula, but we're going to break it down part by part so you have it. So the first thing I want to do is I want to break down this part, the minimum part. Let's take a look at that, and let's pull that out somewhere else, and so we can separate it out. I'm going to copy that, and actually we're going to use Control Shift Enter. Make sure we do that because it is an array formula. And then what we'll do is let's just bring it over here so we can see it somewhere. I'm going to put in a number here, 85, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste this formula equals, and then paste that formula, just that part of the formula, and instead of B11, I'm going to put here, I'm going to put that number that we're going to change right here. So instead of that, so now let's take a look, and of course Control Shift Enter, Control Shift Enter. Okay, so what that's going to do is this formula is the minimum, right? Let's take a look at this minimum if the minimum of H16 through I20. What is that? That's the minimum within this table here from 2 is greater than I22. It's greater than, we're looking for larger. I want the larger one here. Then what we're going to do is display whatever that value is right here. The value, if true, if it's true, I want the value between H16 and I20. What is that going to do? Well, nothing unless we put Control Enter. Then it's going to return the uppermost part of that. So if I enter 95, it's going to put in 100. If I enter 62, it's going to put in 69. It's going to return the upper value right here. Great. So now that I know it's 69, but I want the level. So how are we going to get that? Well, we can use index match for that. Let's use it here. Let's use equals index. What are we indexing? I'm going to index this level here. Right, so what is the row number? Well, the row number is, I'm going to use a match for that. Match, what am I looking up? I'm looking up the 69, right? I want to locate that. Where do I want to find it? I want to find it right here in this 2. So that's going to get us the row, and we want an exact match. So that's going to get us the row, but what about the column? Well, the column is just 1 because I've already indexed just 1 column. That is going to get us our effort. So as soon as we change this to back to 95, it's going to automatically change. Let's go over that again. Okay, so we're using our Control-Shift-Enter an array formula here to pull in the minimum, and we're checking the minimum to seeing if the value that we enter, if their score is within that range. When it is, we're going to pull the upper range value and we're going to place it right here. Then I'm going to use index match, and I'm going to index this level here. What I want to do is I want to find a matching row. When I find this value, I want to find that row, and then I want to index this column using index match to do just that. So that's this formula, and it's broken down. So that's all I have done here. If we take a look at this one here, I've used index, we're indexing J, we're using the match formula, and it's all in there, and then embedded inside that match formula is the minimum. We're looking for the match formula in I6. So all that is the same formula, and don't forget Control-Shift-Enter for the array, and now we have it there. So that's how we're going to pull this. Okay, next up, the email, of course, is in column 8 using the basic index there. We've done that. And then I want to send type. We've got the send type as email. I need to know that. That might be helpful. That's in 9. And I also want the full name here. The full name is going to be helpful. Let's bring that down. I'm going to move that over a little bit left so it's consistent. Okay, I want the full name because in this particular field, I want the full name. Here I've got the last name and the first name, but I really want the full name. So how do we get that? Well, it's just a combination. We could use concatenate, or we could simply use this formula, B6 and a space and B5. So that right there will get us the full name because I want to use the full name in this. Okay, great. So how do we get, now we know how we get the data here, but how do we get the information in this? Well, all these are simple text boxes. If we were to insert a text box, shapes, text box, we just enter a text box and I want it on a certain value, all I have to do is click on the formula bar here, equals, and then just click here. That's it. And then it's going to, and then the rest is just about formatting. So then we can easily just increase the font here. Let's bring this down, select it, increase the font here, center it, and change the font if we want. So it's really, really easy. So that's how all we need to do to get that dynamic data is just connect a text box to it. We can delete that now. Okay, so that's all I've done here. As you can see, this is B8 connected to, which is of course is the school here located in B8. And then the service award, this particular has a style. How do we get this style? We get that curved. If it's a curve, how do we get that? Well, that's a simple text effects. If we click down here, click transform, we can see we've got different types of word arts here. This is the one we've used, but there's many of them. We could use these. So all that is simple transforming a certain text. All right, so that's how we got it curved. And then of course, all we would do is add a specific text fill, a certain color. I've got a text outline here. We could increase the outline here if we wanted to make it stand out a little bit more if we want. We could add more of a shadow here, but those are things that you would pretty simple to do. All right, so now we've got it there. So now we understand how we format this, and we understand how the data is dynamic. So now you understand all we need to do is change the row and the data changes. So all we need to do essentially is go through VBA, start out at row 5, go through the last row, look for anyone that has not created a certificate where this would be blank. Then look here, are we printing it? Are we emailing it? Are we both? And then we're going to run some small macros to email it and to print it. Now, when we email it, what we're going to be doing is taking additional information. I've got a small email template. We can delete this. I'll leave it for you in case you want to break it down. You can see it there when you download it. All right, don't forget you can freely download this using the links in the description as well. If you want over 120 of these, actually 120 for $37, I'll include the link down below. I still have that promotion going on, but I'm not sure for how long, so you might want to pick it up. All right, so we have a basic subject. We have variables. What are the variables? The same in our data: first name, last name, completion date, school name, teacher name, class, score, level, email. So those are all variables, and that means in your subject or in your message we can have those variables, and when the actual email gets created, those variables are then going to be replaced with the actual data. So it's very simple for you to make really custom email templates using these variable data, and it's even easier. So how do we get that? So another way to do that, what I'm going to do in the VBA, I'm going to walk you through it here first. Basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the VBA, I'm going to loop starting from row 5 going all the way to row 9. If the last name is found either in the subject or the message, I'm going to replace it. What am I going to replace it with? I'm going to replace it with whatever's right here. If the first name is found, I'm going to replace it with whatever's here. If the completion date is found, and so on and so forth. School name, I'm going to replace it. So all I need to do is loop through these, look for any of that text, and then replace it with anything that's just to the left of it. Very simple in VBA. So that's all I have to do, and then I'll create the email, and then of course we'll display the email, but you can send the email as well. And then the printing is simply just a one line of code. So let's just go ahead and see just how we did that. If we take a look at this create and send, we right click it and we click assign macro, of course not clicking the entire button, but any of the shapes inside the button because it's grouped. We'll see that we have a macro called create and send. Let's take a look at that macro. Okay, into the VBA we go. If you have the developers tab here, you can click on Visual Basic. You can also click on the shortcut Alt F11 to get you there. But if you don't have the developers tab, you can find that into the options, and then we click customize ribbon, and you can see that we have the developers option right here. Make sure that's selected so you can also see the developers. Into the Visual Basic, this is very simple. I've got a single macro on this workbook, just a single one, and we're going to call it create and send, just as the macro that's been assigned. There is no code on the student sheet, no code on the certificate sheet. Very simple, one single macro. So let's walk through this macro. Well, I'm creating an Outlook email. We're going to use Outlook to send that email. So to do that, we need to create objects. We're going to use late binding, and what that means is that we don't need to have an Outlook reference library. We can define it later on in our code. So we're going to dimension the Outlook app as an object and the Outlook mail as an object. So those are important because we're going to be creating that email if the user has selected to email them. We also have to find the last row. I'm going to need to loop through all of the students, so we need to determine the last row in sheet 1. Also the student row, because we're looping through, we need to keep track of what row we're on. That would be the student row, or STUD row. Very important. Also the variable row is long. We're going to need to know that because we're going to loop through the variables. Remember, we're doing 2 loops. What are the looping through the variables? I'm going to loop through these variables starting in row 5 going all the way to row 13. So we're going to loop through these variables as well. So I need to track that down as a variable. All right, moving along. The email, we got a few strings: email a string, subject a string, message, and file name. Subject as a string, message as a string. We should fill this out as string so it doesn't get done as a variant. Okay, so now that we have message, file name, why do we need file name? We're going to be saving it as a PDF, temporarily at least, and then pulling that PDF from a file, so I need to save that file name as a string. This we don't need. Chart picture, that was an idea. Chart picture you might use if you want that certificate embedded inside the emails. You would define it as a picture, but I already have a video on that as far as how to get a range inside the email body. Okay, with sheet 2, we're going to primarily work on sheet 2, which is the certificate sheet. So that's the one we're going to use, but we're also going to use sheet 1. First thing I want to do is define the last row. That would be on the student sheet, sheet 1. The last row in this case is 19, but we want to put that into a variable because when you add data, I want to make sure this works for you. So the last row is sheet 1, range E999. That's the first column in our table. And XLF row. That's going to give us our last row and put that into a variable. Now we're ready to run our loop. I'm going to start out in row 5 because that is the row that our data starts at. And what I want to do is I want to check for a value in N. If there's a blank value, then we know we may need to run an email. We may need to send an email. We may need to print, or we may want to do both. So we need to first check for a empty. If there's nothing empty, we're going to just move to the next row. If sheet 1N and the student row value equals empty, then only when it's empty, right? Only run the certificate. Then I want to check for something else. Then I want to determine the student row. B4 equals the student row. What does that do? Sheet 2, this is for sheet 2 because we're with sheet 2. So we don't need to define it again here. B4 equals the student row. Again, that's going to put the student row into sheet 2. B4 right here. So it's just going to put whatever row we're on right here. What's that's going to do? I want to do one thing right after I change it. I want to calculate. Just make sure that all of these formulas calculate properly. That's really important because sometimes what we're going to do is we're going to stop our code or stop our calculations or put them to manual, to have our code run quicker. But in this case, we want to make sure that we calculate all those formulas first. To do that, we just need one line of code right here, force calculations. Now, generally, it will change automatically, but this is really a good practice just to force the calculations so that it will calculate automatically. Next up, I want to check to see if we're sending an email. How do we know? There's two conditions. So there's a few ways we can write this. Or we can use an OR statement. If M and the student row equals print an email or equals email then. I could use an OR statement, but in this case, what I also want to do is I want to use inString command. inString is a great command. Basically, it looks for strings within a string. So I want to look for if email is contained anywhere in the string. Like in this case it is, in this case it is, in this case it's not. Right? So I want to use inString, and if the result is not 0, then that means it contains email. And we can do just that with this line of code. If in string command, what are we looking in? Where are we looking? We are looking in sheet 1, M in the student row. Sheet 1, M and the student row. We're looking here, we're looking for email. What are we looking for? We're looking for the text email somewhere inside that text. If it's found, it's going to return a result greater than 0. So that is one condition, but we need two conditions. I also need to make sure that there's actually an email address that's been assigned. So I also need to make sure that L in the student row is not blank. So that's the other condition. And sheet 1, L in the student row value does not equal empty. So if those two conditions are met, then we can continue on creating our email. How do we do that? We're going to define emails. Sheet 1, L in the student row. That defines our email address. The subject, now the subject is the original subject. What do I mean by original? That means it contains the variables. It will contain, for example, it contains first name right here, but not the actual first name, just this variable. And the same thing with the message. So we're going to get the original, and before we send that email, I need to replace all of these variables with the actual student first name or with the actual teacher name. So we need to do that using a replace command. So, but first we need to pull those into variables. So the subject is going to be I4 and the message is going to be I5. I4 here, I5 here. So that's going to now put our subject and our message into those string variables. Next up, now we're ready to replace. So again, what do I want to do? I'll walk you through that again. I want to take a loop starting on C5, going all the way to C13. If the last name is found either in the subject or in the message, I want to replace this text with this text. If the first name is displayed anywhere in the message or in the subject, I want to replace first name with the word Sally. So all we're going to be doing is if it's found, replace it. And we can do that with just actually 4 lines of code because we've got one for the subject and one for the message. So the first line of code is for variable row equals 5 to 13. That's the loop that we're going to run. Next up, we're going to replace. The subject equals whatever the current subject is. What are we looking for? We're looking for something in column C. And what are we replacing it with? Whatever's in column B if it's found. Again, we're looking for whatever's in column C. If it's found, we're going to replace it with whatever's column B. And then we're going to run through that loop and do that for all of these. So just 4 lines of code will do it for both for the message and the subject, replacing any variables found with the actual data. So that's how we do it. That's how we get all of the information into the subject and the message. Next up, I want to create the file name, right? When we create an email, we've got a file name. Let's just take a look at that so we can see how that works. If we delete this and then we click create and send, you'll see that the certificate's been created. Now I need to store this certificate somewhere on my computer, at least temporarily, so that I can then attach it with the email. So how do we do that? We do that with this following code. We need to set a file name. So with the file name, I'm going to use the current workbook path. That is the path wherever your workbook lies. So we're just going to use that as a path because it's an easy path to pull up. Going to give it a slash, and then we're going to give it a name, certificate PDF. So there we've created the file name. All we've done is created a file name. Next up, I want to make sure that that file name doesn't exist in your computer, because if it does, we need to delete it. I can't create a new one if there's a file with the exact same name in the exact same path. So we're going to kill it if it's there. Of course, if it does not exist, it would cause an error if it doesn't exist. So we're going to wrap that in on error resume next and on error go to 0. This prevents any errors in case the file name doesn't exist. So if it exists, it will delete it. Now we can create it. Now we know that we've defined the name and we've just cleared out in case it's there in your folder. Now we're ready to create it. We can do that using the export as feature. We don't have to define sheet 2, and we've already set the print areas. Let's take a look at that. Predefining and setting your print areas is an important part of that. So if we slide over here and we zoom out a little bit, I've already set the print area. If we preview that, and you'll see the print area is already set. What is that area? Well, basically it is F3. F3 is where we're starting out, and all the way to F39. So that is the print area. All you do is just highlight those cells. Of course, the cells are behind this award, but all you do is highlight those cells and then click page layout and then click print area and click set print area. You can also do it through VBA if you have a variable range, as we've done in the past. Okay, so we know how to set the print area. So now all we need to do is print it, because we know when we preview it, we know that it's already set up for that. So we can now use export as a PDF. So sheet 2, export as a fixed format. What's the type? We're type PDF. We've already defined the file name up here, so we know the file name. And if we look through all the options, we can just click the comma here, and we can see the other options. The quality we can leave blank. We can leave blank the include documents. We do not want to ignore the print areas. We want to keep the print areas, so that's false. And we're just going to print from one sheet to one sheet, and then of course open after publish. We could open the PDF if you wanted to open it using true, and so that's going to create the PDF. Now we've created it, and so now it's already in your file folder as a file name, this file name. So now that we've done that, we're ready to create the email. We've created our subject, we've created our message with the dynamic variables in, we've created our PDF file name. Now we're ready to create the email. So how do we do that? We can set the Outlook app as create object. This is going to create the Outlook application right here. It's going to define it, the Outlook application, because what I need to do is I need to create a new email. We can do that with this set Outlook email. What that's going to do is, using your Outlook application, it's going to create a new email, which is this, create item 0. That creates the email. It doesn't do anything with it. All we've done is created a new email, but we need to do something with it now. So what are we going to do? With the Outlook email, we need to set the to. We could use this. We define this actually, so we've defined it up here under email, so we could actually change this to email. It's a little bit more clear since we've already defined it. Email. Now that we've defined it into a variable. Attachments. I want to add an attachment. We've just created it, so we know the name. All we need to do is add and then file name. That's going to add the certificate as an attachment. The subject, we know we've defined that, included all the variables into subject. The body, that's going to be our message. That's going to create a message. And then we're going to display it. I want to show it to you. I want you to see it. I don't want to send it. But when you want this working, you're going to take this and you're going to change it to .send. That is going to send the email without displaying it. But for our purposes in the training, we want to keep it displayed. We don't want to send it. So that creates email. Next up, on error, go to 0 in case there are any issues. I'm going to set the Outlook mail to nothing and then resume next just in case there's any issues setting it to nothing. Then what I want to do is I want to kill the file name. We know once it's sent, we no longer need that PDF attachments. In fact, I want to make sure that delete that temporary certificate because we may be creating another one using the same file name. So we want to make sure that we've deleted it. Once it's sent through Outlook, we don't need that PDF inside our file folder anymore, so we can delete it. All right, so that's the end if of the email option. So that's the end if. That started out up here, right up here, if the string contained emails greater than 0, and if there's actually an email address. So this ends the end if. Now we want to check for printing. What if it's a printer? What if it contains the word print? Again, we're going to use in string right here. We're going to look for if there's print. If there's print anywhere in M, then that means the user has instructed VBA to print it. So that's just what we're going to do. If the in string sheet 1M, if it contains the word print, and that's greater than 0, that means it does contain it. In that case, we're going to just do a printout. All we need to do is do .printout, and let's take a look at some of the variables here. If we add a comma here, we can see that we're going to print 2 copies. We don't need to define that. We don't need to preview it. We want to set it to the active printer, so that's going to set it. We don't need to print to file. We also don't need to print a file name, and this last one is ignore print areas. It's a little bit off your screen, but there we go. So ignore print areas. We don't want to ignore the print area. We've set the print area, so we want to make sure to honor that print area. That is going to print it out to whatever your default printer is. If you want to do it to a specific printer, all you would need to do is right here, you would put in your printer name right in this area here. That would send it to a specific printer. All right, that's it. Now we're end if. Now this is the end if the certificates have already been created. This is the end if. So then it's going to move to the next student row. It's going to loop through every single student row, just like this. As long as there's no value in here, it's going to either print or email or both. That is how we run this macro. That's how you can create dynamic certificates. All right, I hope you have enjoyed this training. A little bit quicker, a little bit simpler, but really, really powerful. You can create any type of certificate, any type of award, anything using these dynamic variables. If you like this video, make sure to subscribe, share, and like this video. I always appreciate your comments and your likes. And if you do get a chance to check out that mentorship program, I think you would really love it. I'm working hard on it, so I really appreciate it. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next week.